Well, I have the enviable task of being between you and lunch. So I will do my best to give you as much energy as I can to keep you awake and hopefully hold you around. Regrettably, I don't think I'm going to tell you anything you hadn't already heard. I mean, I listened to Jed, I listened to Eric, I listened to Catherine, and I'm like, dang, they just stole all my slides. But I think what I'm going to do is try to frame the topic for you a little bit in terms of what this means in the market, what this means to your organization, and what this means to your people. There are three concerns that are top of mind. The first one is digital transformation and complexity. You notice I put those two together, right? Because as we talk about digital transformation has fundamentally changed IT. It's not about cloud, it's not about tech. Boy, I'm going to be stealing half of Eric's stats, right? Because he said it's 8% tech. And I'm like, that feels about right. Right? Because as we look at what digital transformation means, it fundamentally changes the terms of business. Right? We talked about this experimental phase, and then we talked about actually transforming. Now we're moving this version called digital first. 2023, we're going to do $2.1 trillion in digital offerings. That fundamentally changes. Now IT has moved from an expense, and now it's a profit center. By 2026, IDC believes that 40% of the revenue of the Global 2000 will be from digital-first products. 40%. Now, what that means for you is we're not thinking about security first. We're not thinking about IT first. We're thinking about revenue. We're thinking about profits. And unfortunately, for you folks, this means complexity. Now, there are some unicorns out there that'll actually reduce the amount of complexity. I would call these the intentioned. The rest of them would be those people that failed Eric's three tests of people, culture, and process. You know, the 92% that creates additional complexity. And this complexity, by the way, is permanent. Some folks look at this next slide as being positive. I view this as being negative. This is looking at multi-cloud. Now, for me, I'm a security guy. I think fundamentally the task of implementing security is being intention. When we talk about being intention, what I mean is reducing complexity up front. One cloud is better than 5 clouds, but 72% plan for interoperability between their clouds. I read that as going, oh my gosh, 72% think this multi-cloud thing is permanent. Permanent. And as we look at this idea of digital transformation and all these evolutions, we talked about the Kubernetes. Now, I stole this slide. The nice thing about being at IDC is I work with a lot of really, really, really smart people, do a lot of really, really smart research. Some people would call this plagiarism. In market research, we call this strategic repurposing. And so as we look at strategic repurposing, we look at those folks looking to go to Kubernetes. And why do they go to Kubernetes? If you look on the left, they go, we're looking to improve security. Well, that's fantastic. What's the top challenge? Security. It's hard, right? Because what have we done? We fundamentally changed the architectures of the way we're building applications. And I think we fundamentally missed the idea. Moving from VM-based to Kubernetes isn't just about another environment. It's just about another way of code. We fundamentally miss that we're moving from a somewhat monolithic-based architecture to thousands of microservices. It's a completely different way to do things. And the issue is complexity begets breaches. So what we did, and interesting, we were doing our cloud security survey, and we were asking people, hey, how many breaches have you had? And we mapped them by the number of IaaS environments you had. And you look and you go, hey, those people that had one breach, you look at that great big blue of one environment. And then you see 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we looked at those people who had 5 or more breaches. Holy cow. The single clouds are a lot smaller. And oh, by the way, we created a new category. Those that had 6 IaaS environments, because no one that had one breach only had one. And by the way, these measures of complexity, I think I heard earlier, I heard last night, I'm sorry. If you want to make something happen, you measure it. Well, you start looking at mean time to detection, mean time to remediation, number of unaddressed alerts, again and again and again. Correlations between breaches and complexity. And so as we look at this whole idea of digital transformation now, this is actually a framework we created in like 2018. We talked to the 4 new control points of digital transformation. Now that we're in 2023, I'm like, wow, I think we got this right. Because when your applications leave the premises, when your data leaves the premises, when your people leave the premises, you have to fundamentally change the way you implement security. You have to start looking at the endpoint, right? No longer can we rely on the network, right? Because we don't have hard perimeters. And if the entire network is encrypted and everything is dark, well, you have to implement security where you have visibility. And then you have to implement security where you can, where you have an agent. The second one is the identity, right? The application is now the new perimeter. It's funny, it's been the new perimeter for about, I think I said this in like 2016, but identity is becoming now the foundation of which you can implement security. Application, I joke, layer 7 is the new layer 3 or layer 4, right? Because that is where you can implement security. And finally, the data. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But this is the bounty. This is what the bad people are looking to get. Oh, and by the way, your management is not your friend, right? As we talk to suites, what are the most serious hurdles about implementing your digital initiatives in your organization? You folks? Your management looks at you as the enemy. All right, so 3 concerns top of mind. Second one, I think we know this, growing hacker sophistication, right? I love this quote. Catastrophic mutating strike event will strike the world in 2 years. Dude, that sounds like WannaCry, doesn't it? I think that's kind of last year's data. Anyway, I thought it was cute, so I put it in the deck. The interesting thing is I get a lot of questions about, tell me about the recent ransomware epidemic. Recent? Okay. You mean that thing that started in 1989 at an AIDS conference? No, I get it. How about that 2006 thing that was distributed in floppy disks? Oh, wait. How about we started doing CryptoLocker and started propagating these things differently in 2013? How about the fact that we started focusing on vulnerabilities in 2016? We started doing spear phishing in 2018. And the fact that all of a sudden now we're doing supply chain attacks, Kaseya, SolarWinds, you know the words, right? We have a history of growing sophistication. This is going to continue. Now, I stop for a second. Every time I do a deck, I have this slide. What is ransomware? And everybody goes, Frank, my audience knows what ransomware is. Okay, good. So let's talk about it. It's a type of malware from cryptobiology that encrypts your files, right? Makes them inaccessible and demands a ransom to decrypt them, right? That's ransomware. Really? Okay. So let's talk about what that means. So in about 2006, we had an average ransom of about $150. Pretty decent encryption. In 2013, all of a sudden, we looked how to monetize it. We improved the encryption. But let's face it, Bitcoin is what created this. This is 2013. Average ransom was about $1,000. This fits that definition of ransomware. But it didn't stop, did it? What happened? We found out if that endpoint that was connected to a network store, when it went off, it encrypted the network store. And if the network store was encrypted, all of a sudden we found out, ooh, organizations are much more willing to pay. So what did the bad people do? They moved laterally. They escalated privileges. They looked for persistence in the master boot record, and the ransoms went up. And then we go, whoo. What we'll do is we'll focus on, we'll create ransomware as a service. Half the people will write the ransomware, and we'll just have another group of folks that are experts at penetrating your networks. And so we had ransomware as a service. We looked at evading detection. We looked at modifying services. We created backdoors. We did identity theft. And all of a sudden, the ransom went up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then what we started doing is we started, hey, if they'll pay us to give them back their data, will they pay us to not expose it publicly? So why don't we start exfiltrating it, or we'll start shaming them, we'll start creating targeting. So the key point here is that definition that we think about, that 2013 definition is worth about $1,000. The other $999,000 is not the ransomware, it's about the ransomware attacker. And ransomware is not just about the ransoms, right? It's about the business disruption. 24% of businesses will be disrupted for a week or more. And so as we talk about ransomware, we talk about that attacker, we talk about 5 opportunities to stop. We talk about the initial compromise. We talk about the lateral movement. We talk about the privilege escalation. We talk about data exfiltration. And finally, we talk about the encryption. If your teams are focused on detecting the encryption and stopping the encryption, you're done. The data has already left the network, right? We need to focus on the 5 steps to think about this holistically. Finally, let's talk about the security professional scarcity, right? As we survey companies, we ask, which of the following do you expect will have the greatest impact on your IT spending and plans for the rest of 2022? We did this late last year. IT labor staffing shortages, right? Well, when we look at 2023, oh, by the way, I've got to say thanks to the Delphix people, right? I'm on a plane coming back from RSA. I got this new data. I go, oh, I'd like to present this. You know how thrilled people are normally when you call them up and you go, hey, I want to change the deck for Tuesday's presentation? Or is this Wednesday? Anyway, whatever day it is, they're not very thrilled. The Delphix people were very helpful. Once again, same thing as inflation, budgets. Staffing is number 2. And oh, by the way, as we look at this staffing problem, who's in the greatest shortage? IT security professionals, right? Trying to address that complexity problem and trying to address that hacker sophistication problem, we're doing it with less people and more expensive people. We're starting to see some impacts on tooling, right? As you're asking your vendors, hey, I got a problem. Your vendors are very much looking at this and going, hey, we need to get more effective use out of our people. So we're seeing changes. Security and orchestration tools, right? Key now for zero trust, not microsegmentation, not new identity proxies, automation. So here are the 3 things that are top of mind. And if you could leave this place with remembering anything that I had said, when you make a decision, think of these things. Digital transformation complexity, hacker sophistication, security professional scarcity. However, there's a couple of results now that we have to talk about, right? Nothing that you don't know. But let's talk about tool proliferation and platformization. This is our market glance on DevOps. This is just DevOps, right? This isn't security, this isn't cloud workload security, this is DevOps. I wanted to come up here with a Delphix t-shirt and go, hey, spot the Delphix logo up here. Like, this is hard. Like, there are a lot of companies that you folks have got to manage. And if you try to do it alone in a single best-of-breed solution, you will create more problems than you will solve, right? Platforms, platforms, platforms. Help yourselves in your tool selection by ameliorating complexity in yourself, right? And so we're starting to see more and more of these platformizations. This example comes from building blocks for cloud workload protection, right? Because as we started looking at cloud workloads, the first thing we did when we went to the cloud is we just, it's a server, it's just virtualized, right? So we took what we had on-prem. We did firewalls and anti-intrusion protection, anti-malware, wide reputation, right? That's what we did on-prem. And then we go, whew, that's not working very well. We're getting breached. Oh, it's vulnerabilities now in the cloud, right? Because now our server, because it's in the cloud, by definition, is publicly accessible by anywhere in the world via the internet. So we started working about vulnerability management, things like not just at things in runtime, but at build and in production. And we're looking for open source tools. Because remember, a piece of code that's in production takes 6 times as much effort to fix as something that we do in real time. And then we go, oh, vulnerabilities are great. But then we have what I call the open S3 bucket issue, right? We have this perfect code, and everything's great, and we put it in the cloud, and the S3 bucket's just open, right? So then we started focusing on infrastructure settings. Now we have IOC scanning and cloud entitlement scanning. And then finally, then we started looking at developer tools, right? Because we started figuring out, hey, if we make security hard for developers, then they're just going to leave us out, right? So then we started doing things like code signing and secure software, data and secrets management. And it's not just about you, right? Because as we look at these, what we're seeing is, both data security and data privacy folks have a need for the same platforms. Once again, I'm going to steal Eric's process. People, process, right? Culture. Continuing growth of compliance. This is scary. Like, I don't know how you guys do it. As we talk to this is from our CEO survey. Love this survey. I relish this. When we ask them, which of the three will have the biggest impact on your business, CEOs go, now and in the future, cybersecurity threats and regulations, right? But we're also seeing changing environmental practices and addressing new problems. Once again, here's a slide I saw on the plane. I go, ooh, I didn't insert that, right? This comes from March 2023, just hot off the press. By the way, don't tell anyone you saw this, because we actually haven't published any of this data yet. I'm sure my boss would be thrilled that I'm showing you data that I haven't even published. But once again, security, compliance, risk. Top for 2023. But you'll notice, it's not necessarily uniform across organization. Describe the level that IT cybersecurity has in the purchase data privacy tools. In the US, half. In the UK, much different, right? As you go from geography to geography, sometimes we get caught up in the fact that we think that, everything is uniform. It is just not. This is the crazy stat. So this is a slide or a survey work that we did on data subject access requests. So we replicate this study about every 2 years. 2 years ago, we surveyed, figure out what your data access requests were. In just 2 years, the number of data access requests have grown 1,420%. If that's a highly manual process, you are going to make some people very angry. You can't do that manually. It's got to be part of your platforms. And by the way, once again, every region is different. This is digital sovereignty. This is crazy. There's about the same number of people in North America. They're kind of going, I'm not sure I know what data sovereignty is. That almost exact same number of people, about 40-ish, are actively implementing data sovereignty solutions in Europe. If you're not talking about digital sovereignty in places like Germany and France and the UK, you are lost. New buyers and old buyers with new priorities, right? We're dealing with a new tech buyer. 50% of all tech spend is now done by line of business. It's that digital transformation issue, right? We're not necessarily worried about security. We're not necessarily worried about compliance. What are they worried about? Time to market, revenue, decreased costs. 35% of the global workforce is now the millennial buyer. These are people that were born and raised with the iPhone. User experience is critical to them. If you wreck their user experience, they will delete you from the process. And finally, the digital CIO buyer. A third of all CIOs now see their role as driving innovation. Not in creating IT, not in security, driving innovation, right? What did Eric call himself? Center of enablement. Enablement. Not security, not data, but enablement, right? How do we enable the organization? How do we drive innovation? And as we look at the KPIs that were regularly tracked by the board, for digital infrastructure, where's security? Like digital cloud infrastructures. Quality time. Oh, here. We put a red box around it, right down there at the bottom. And so the other thing you have to remember, God, I should have just stole all Eric's slides. People, process, culture, right? One particular solution may have many masters, right? Cloud security posture management persona, right? You have the person that's managing the cloud or the cloud environments. What do they need, right? They need visibility into the cloud. They need to be able to do compliance. They need to report compliance. They need to be able to collect data. They don't always know what your applications do, right? So they don't want to touch things. They don't want to mess things, because what are they going to do? They're going to introduce latency, and holy cow. Can you imagine what would happen if they actually did something that stopped it, that took down your environment? Woo! Poor people. I mean, they may have hundreds of applications they manage, so they can't have an agent. When we look in those IaaS environments, these are the kind of the whiz orcas of the world, if you've ever heard of them. But as we shift left, you get the CISO. The CISO can't do that, right? They need real-time, they need runtime visibility in what's going on. They need to be able to know what's connecting to what. They need to be able to look at vulnerabilities in code, in production, right? Because every container is immutable until the application developer decides to change it in real time. And then you look at the app developer, right? They need to be able to validate open source code and dependencies. I call this the log4j problem. But they need to be able to do it as they're building code. Once again, because if the code goes to production, it takes them 6 times as much effort to fix that code in production as in live code. It needs to seamlessly flow in their CI/CD pipeline, right? Because how are they evaluated? They're evaluating the velocity of code, right? They're trying to drop code regularly, hourly, maybe in 10 minutes, right? Trust. This is becoming a bigger and bigger topic. So we talk to folks and surveyed. Now, when we talk about trust, it's not just about being a great person, right? It's about how do you create outcomes? How do you leverage things like security, compliance, privacy to create a differentiated advantage in the marketplace? And so we surveyed buyers of IaaS environments. And we asked, hey, what are the most important criteria in selecting an IaaS environment? Now, because I've got a little bit of gray hair and been doing this for a while, I used to say, hey, here are the most important things, other than cost, right? Because cost is always number one. Not anymore. Security is number one. Security is the most important consideration when selecting an IaaS environment. By the way, we just did this for database management systems. Same thing. Then cost. Well, then you're thinking it's flexibility or scalability. Nope. Privacy's next. Then availability, then flexibility, then compliance, and then environmental and social ESG. Now, as we look at security, what's the most attribute? What's the most important thing? Threat detection response. Okay, great. What's number 2? Skilled staff. Skilled staff. And we're getting this theme that comes a lot, right? Implementing security is hard. A lot of times that customer, you're trying to create an outcome. You need help in creating that outcome. And so as we look for creating help with that outcome, skilled staff may be one of the most important criteria for evaluating a particular offender. As we look at privacy, same thing, but as we get down to compliance, look in that middle box. What else is there, right? Trust centers are important, right? How am I able to get my compliance data at scale? Once again, skilled leadership, skilled staff and leadership to help me get outcomes. And so as we look at some of these things, we were here last night, Sustainable IT started talking about their various attributes of ESG. ESG is now an important criteria. And as we look at these criteria, it's important to note, these aren't symmetrical. It's at the bottom here, right? Because it's a worldwide average. Sometimes I hate presenting aggregated things across the globe, right? Because we did this survey research across 10 different countries. And if I look at the European countries, ESG jumps up 3 spots, right? It's almost as important as security, right? Every region is not the same. And as what are some of the things that we look at? Affordable pricing, good governance, embedded KPIs. And as we look at what ESG is going to do, there's a strong compliance factor here. So we talk about the GHG protocol, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? The first part of it, scope 1, pretty easy. What are your emissions? Scope 2, what are your indirect emissions, right? From things like purchased electricity, leased assets, things. Scope 3, right? Suppliers, vendors, upstream and downstream. The SEC is looking at implementing regulations about what we're going to report. They're going all the way to scope 3. You should consider the impact of ESG now. Finally, security out of control, right? When I first graduated with a bachelor's degree in the Cro-Magnon era, I got my degree in production, manufacturing. And we were big on monitoring and managing things statistically. And we said, hey, if we can measure it statistically, if things fall within 3 sigma, 4 sigma, 6 sigma, we would say that it's out of control. But if we can't measure it statistically, if we think we get some variations, we call that out of control. Security is out of control. What do you mean? So we talk once again to our friends, the CEOs, right? How important is cybersecurity threats in terms of your broader priorities? Holy crap. Only half say it's very important. Okay, great. Our C-suite understands this, right? Which of the following will your organization be prioritizing in 2022? Once again, security on top. Once again, recent data from March of 2023, right? Which of the following areas are immune to budget regardless of the economic environment? Security, risk, and compliance. The panel discussion was saying that earlier, right? Here's the problem. Once again, talking to our friends, the CEOs, please indicate if you're concerned about the growing expenditures. Over half are concerned about growing expenditures, and a third are actively looking to reduce their spend on security. Why? Because we come to them every year and we say, hey, I need X amount of money to make us secure. And the CEO goes, is that not going to make us safe? Yeah, sure, yeah. And then next year we come to them and we go, hey, I need X plus Y. And they go, what? I gave you X last year, now it's X plus Y? Well, everything keeps changing. And the rationale and the issue is that CEOs are looking for different metrics. We keep telling them how many alerts that we solve or how many vulnerabilities we address. And what the CEO wants is, are we safe? Right? Now, I thought this was going to happen in 2020, but COVID happened. We broke glass. We got to spend whatever we want. And now, more and more CEOs are looking to be able to evaluate the cyber risk posture. They don't want a breach-centric perspective anymore. We're migrating from this cyber breach-centric perspective to a cyber risk-centric perspective, because what the CEO wants to do is translate that to a business risk conversation. And so what does this mean? What IDC thinks this means is by 2025, 45% of CEOs fatigued of security spending without measurable, predictable ROI will demand security metrics and measure against those metrics. When they invest, they want a measurement of outcome. It's a changing conversation as it relates to security. So, what does this all mean for you? Well, as I talk in a lot of different user conferences, there are 8 concerns I always bring up. Now, as you go, I'm not, once again, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But as you talk to your vendors, when you talk internally, when you start evaluating different processes, when you start talking to Delphix, 8 concerns are mine. First of all, what is the benefit? What problem is being solved? Please explain to me what you're getting. Are you reducing the attack surface? Are you reducing your mean time to detection? Are you reducing your mean time to remediation? Right? How is this creating a benefit? Machine learning is not a benefit. AI is not a benefit. Now, it's a way to create a benefit, right? I once upon a time had a CEO get up to me and start getting all upset because I asked him a benefit. He goes, Frank, if I locked you in a room with my data sciences for 20 hours, you'd come out and go, I've got the best machine learning. And I go, if it takes you 20 hours to describe for me how I get a benefit out of your product, you've lost. Right? What's the benefit? What's the offering? Right? Sometimes we get confused. We lose the point between what is a feature, what is a product, what is a platform, as a company. And quite frankly, in my opinion, I think those cycles are shortening. Like, how long was IAC scanning a different market? Like 6 months? How long was external attack surface management a separate market? About 4 months? Those cycles are condensing, and they're condensing fast. Why? Because you need solutions to be able to solve a problem. Scalability. By the way, this is the wrong time to wonder if I was allowed to jump off the stage and walk into the audience. Thanks. Scalability. What happens when you have capacity, right? You start dropping packets? Does the platform get slow? Do you get a new bill in the mail? Like, ask the question before you get there, because the one thing that we've seen about IT leaders is you always underestimate the amount of capacity you're going to need and you're going to use. Support. We talked about this, right? Long ago, I did this survey on identity and access management. I was asking, how do you feel about your vendors, right? 1,000 folks, right? And the vast majority go, I like my vendor. And when you liked your vendor, you go, what's the most important part? They go, best of breed, great technology, good cost, scalability. And you're like, oh, great. Yeah, that makes sense. And when you ask those people that were dissatisfied with their current vendor, what was the most important attribute they'd look at? They go, good customer references. Good customer references. What does that mean? The issue is they bought a product and they didn't get their outcome. Now, either the tech was hard to use, or maybe professional services failed, or maybe it wasn't low code or no code or hard to scale. Whatever it was, it doesn't matter. They weren't able to get an outcome. Support is one of those ways we enable an outcome. We saw that earlier in the trust data. Time to value. Never forget the first time I went to a NAC conference. And I'm talking to one of the gentlemen, and he goes, I've got my new NAC, and I've been running it, and I've got running it in the data center for 6 months now. And I go, great. What have you been able to do with it yet? And he goes, it's on monitor mode. I go, monitor mode? He goes, yeah, it's on monitor mode. I go, you've had that product, and you've been paying it for 6 months. You haven't get any value out of it? I thought that was crazy. More traditional than we thought. Time to value is critical. When COVID came out, my team did a research doc about what the impacts of COVID were going to be on security. And you know what? I'm going to break my arm, pat myself on the back, but we nailed it. We nailed it. And one of the things we said, though, was everyone's going to go to SaaS. And we got it right for the exact wrong reason. Yeah. Because everyone did go to SaaS, but we thought it was because, hey, no one's going to be on-prem. You're not going to want to install servers. You don't want to be able to install software. You want to be able to configure things. No. People were going to SaaS because they needed fast time to value. And the reason I know this is because there's some security applications that weren't SaaS that were being adopted quickly. Time to value. Do not let your vendors tell you it's going to take days or weeks or months. I say 15 minutes. Hey, give them the benefit of the doubt. Give them an hour. But you need to be able to show quick time to value. Complexity. Our platforms need to solve the problems that we create for ourselves, right? When Jed was talking on stage, right, what was one of the attributes he was talking about the Delphix platform? He was talking about multi-cloud data management, right? And not just across IaaS, but you notice he threw SaaS in there. You know, quite frankly, we haven't gotten there yet. But 2024, Frank's opinion, you can call me on if I'm right or wrong, is going to be about SaaS security, right? Because we think we kind of replicate what we did in IaaS to SaaS, right? We went to SaaS and we go, hey, right, they'll take care of that problem. But we still haven't thought about the SaaS provider doesn't control my identity, the SaaS provider doesn't secure my data, and the SaaS provider doesn't control the APIs. And by the way, that neat little application we just logged on to Salesforce has got open access to all our data. And if I just made you feel uncomfortable, just think Salesforce, GitHub, HR, like holy cow, your entire company is based on SaaS. And I don't know if you have a great data strategy or security strategy to adapt to SaaS. That's the topic of 2024. I don't want to bring that up quite yet. Usability, low code, no code. The day and age where we're going to have specialized query languages to be able to create things is done. And finally, future-proof, right? Is it proprietary stack or is it an open stack? What do you care? It's your vendor's problem to make sure that they take care of both, right? Because you're not buying a product, you're investing in a platform, you're investing in an organization, and the last thing you want to do is pay the cost to move from one platform to another. I had the privilege once upon a time of talking to a CISO at one of the top 3 auto manufacturers, and he was considering moving from one data loss prevention platform to another. And I'm thinking to myself, why are we doing this? Well, purchasing found a solution that they thought was a little bit cheaper. And I asked, I go, how long do you think it's going to take to migrate all of those current rules from one data loss prevention platform to another? And he goes, oh, I think it'll take a year. I go, dude, that's a lot of professional services hours, isn't it? And he goes, yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, a year, whatever, it'll take 3. Future-proof. And with that, I say thank you.